certainly if you fix retainage and you didn't have it, it would be easier. And certainly if you got paid faster, it would be easier. But they're actually not the real cause of the problem. The real cause of the problem is a lack of information on the forefront of going into that project. It's the lack of knowledge of knowing how much money do I have to put out? Is it the right amount of money? Am I using the right vendors? What is the cash flow cycle? If you don't have all the information, you have a longer cycle of cash that you need to, a revenue cycle than is normal process, and you have bigger dollars under more stress with heightened risk. That naturally is going to be a tougher environment to live in. In a more tough environment, you need more information. In a more tough environment where you need more information, you need accurate information. And any absence of that is going to really come back to be painful or more painful or create even a heightened level of risk associated to it. And folks, that right there is why the construction cash flow cycle is so difficult. Talked about this, problems are going to occur on construction projects. There's ebbs and flows all the time. The schedule isn't always the way it started out to be. The contract work isn't always the way it started to be. The site is not always the way it's perfectly designed to be. All of those things are very normal, even though they are technically different than as planned. But one thing we can always control is the cash that we have available to us, when we spend it, and how we can execute that and react to it. And that is what we set out to make sure we could fix. Storm. So it's not a perfect hurdle. Everybody has those problems. But it's when you have the right team around you with the right access to information that you can actually endure just about any storm. And you will. Hey everybody. Have you ever wondered if you're good enough to keep this project going? Good enough to even keep the business moving along, good enough to handle it at the next phase you're at. Maybe you've grown really far, grown a lot, just become bigger and bigger, and now maybe you feel like you're over your skis. Maybe you just had a bad project that set you back a little bit, and you're trying to figure out when is the right time, or is it at all the right time to actually get after it one more time and keep growing. All of those things are very normal, and if you've even thought for 1 second and said yes to any of those comments, this video is going to be perfect for you to listen to. My name is Scott Peper. I'm the CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and today I want to talk to you about how and why this lending program can fix the broken cash flow cycles that you guys have to endure over and over again, not only in business, but particularly in the construction industry or any other work in progress billing, milestone-based invoicing that you have to do or engage in with customers. In this video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about decoding the problem that exists in the cash flow cycle of these type of businesses that we're all involved with, whether it's construction cash flow, whether you're dealing with an industry like that you have to do progress billing, milestone billing, maybe you're a government contractor and you have 90-day billing cycles, retainage, all of these things that make cash flow very, very difficult. We're going to decode what that actual problem is. We're going to discuss what the solutions are. And I'm going to give you a little bit more insight on tactical ways that you can actually fix those and not only survive inside them, but actually thrive. And I have numerous examples of not only businesses we've seen, guidance I've received myself, or actually clients of ours we've worked with for 4, 5, 6 years, or others that have come to us at different stages of the cycle. I'm going to go through a bunch of examples for you guys to see exactly how you can make this work. So let me give you a little bit of background first. How did this person, Scott here, talking to you guys about this even get started? When I grew up in a modest background, I went to a school called Cuca College. I don't have a finance degree, but yet somehow I've been able to find myself in the middle of this construction cash flow cycle trying to solve this problem with a finance company and no finance degree. How did someone with a sports background in college, playing basketball, then getting into different sales of medical device sales, even a year in pharmaceutical sales, and then spent time with Stryker Orthopedics and different corporate America, how did I even land here? And if I can land here with a solution that works for this cycle, in this construction cash flow cycle, or this cash flow cycle that you're in, then that means you can certainly survive in it. And not only that, but you can definitely thrive in it. And that's what I want to focus on today. So first, let's start with decoding the actual problem. Look, every different business, every different customer engagement, whether you're selling a service or a product to a consumer, regardless, it has a revenue cycle attached to it. What does that mean? That means it takes a certain amount of time for you to create the product, service, or whatever it is you're going to sell to your customer. It takes them time to decide how they're going to purchase it. And then, of course, it takes time for you to bill it, invoice it, get paid for it, and repeat the process. That is the revenue cycle. So looking at construction, for example, if you are looking at the construction revenue cycle, it is tenuous. It's stressful. You have a lot of cash going out up front. You have to invoice only once a month. And then it takes 30, 40, or 60, 45, 60, 75, 80 days sometimes to get paid, or even longer. So that cash flow cycle is where the pain starts to exist. But it's not actually why the pain exists. Let me explain. A lot of folks will focus on retainage as a problem, and it is. They'll focus on payment delays as a problem, and it definitely is. Those are things that can cause, and they're actually things that make the cash flow cycle of construction difficult, but they're not the actual cause of the problem. Now, what I mean by that is certainly if you fix retainage and you didn't have it, it would be easier. And certainly if you got paid faster, it would be easier. But they're actually not the real cause of the problem. The real cause of the problem is a lack of information on the forefront of going into that project. It's the lack of knowledge of knowing how much money do I have to put out? Is it the right amount of money? Am I using the right vendors? What is the cash flow cycle? I know what my bid is and I know what I'm supposed to make. And if I did all the work today and I invoiced it all tomorrow and I got paid the next day, you don't need a cash flow cycle because it's short enough and quick enough that you just need your bid. But that's not how this works, and we all know that. So when I say that retainage, slow payments are problems, but not the problem, that's what I'm talking about. The problem is knowing the information you need to know up front, decoding what that system's going to look like, and then developing your plan to execute using those factors as real hard concrete pieces of information. When you can plan for those, that's the real difference between surviving and succeeding inside the construction cash flow cycle. Because when you know exactly how many dollars you're going to have to put out on a particular project before you ever have to execute it, you can then plan which vendors you're going to use under which terms. You can make decisions on how you're going to put labor onto that project, how much labor on that project, in what format you're going to put it in. Are you going to use subcontract labor? Are you going to use your own direct labor? Are you going to prefabricate things internally? You can start to analyze all those costs. And candidly, folks, that's the real difference between the companies that are surviving and succeeding in the 10, 20, 50, $100 million range in construction, or grew to $100 million or more in construction, than when you actually first start out in the first several million. And that's okay. These are things that you're trying to learn. So managing cash and building projects is unlike any other industry. And let me touch on a couple reasons why. We just talked about the lack of information, and we talked about the knowledge that you need to have. And if you are not aware of all those things, it makes it difficult. But let me tell you what makes it even more difficult. On a construction project, you're typically dealing with big numbers, okay? We're not selling little widgets that you can put on a credit card. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more. Because of that, it also creates more risk. It also creates a heightened awareness. It also creates some fear. It also creates anxiety, and it also creates the stress associated to that because we're dealing with bigger numbers. So that cash flow cycle and the stress points around it is really a part that you have to manage even more closely. So think about it. If you don't have all the information, you have a longer cycle of cash that you need to, a revenue cycle than is normal process, and you have bigger dollars under more stress with heightened risk, that naturally is going to be a tougher environment to live in. In a more tough environment where you need more information, you need accurate information. And any absence of that is going to really come back to be painful or more painful or create even a heightened level of risk associated to it. And folks, that right there is why the construction cash flow cycle is so difficult. I want to take you guys back to the beginning a little bit and the origins of mobilization funding, but I'm going to take one step back behind that. Where I did mention I was in medical device sales and I had no finance experience, and all of that is true. But one thing I did have, I grew up with a father who was in the construction business. We paid all of our bills and grew up based on the construction industry. My dad, from the second he was out of high school, all the way till he retired and ultimately sold his business, he spent the greater part of 40 or more years in the construction field as a subcontractor in the commercial aluminum and glazing business. And all the summers, all the times I spent in the warehouse doing all the different chores and jobs, whether it was just sweeping up the floor, talking to the guys, cutting glass, insulating glass, prefabbing metal frames, whether I was on the site just pulling stickers off of the actual windows, cutting mirrors, I did all those things. And it gave me an awareness of the industry itself. But even more importantly, as I got older, my dad would share some of the problems around why he's bidding certain jobs, why he doesn't bid bigger jobs, why he likes to stick with smaller jobs, certain customers, bigger customers, other customers, the power of relationships. All of those things were things that got dripped onto me over a period of tens of years, multiple decades, that I was able to actually absorb, and I didn't realize it until we actually got into the construction industry. So the early forms of mobilization funding came to me from a friend, and I've told this story before, some of you may have heard it, but bottom line, short version is, a friend called me one day, thought he had a great idea to create a loan program to solve the construction cash flow issues. And we'll get into that another day, and maybe we'll do another episode on it. But at the end of the day, he asked me to be part of the company or help him because he thought I had good experience because of my father in construction. Not a great reason, but it was a decent one. And so the early days, we set out to actually solve this problem that I've articulated to you guys by creating a loan program. Now, the first version of our loan program was okay. It's not certainly what it is today, 12 years later, but it is and was still solving the same exact problem that we set out to do. And that's provide working capital, cash, upfront on a project to construction contractors so they can execute the work they need to execute, and then repay the loan with the project proceeds they receive as they bill them. Simple process. Makes perfect sense. Now, the execution of that is vastly different. And how you go about doing that and who you go about doing it with is part of the keys to success, and we learn those early lessons. One of the earliest lessons that we learned happened by making loan on a project and having it go all wrong. Now, it went all wrong, not for the fault of a commercial contractor or even the fault of a general contractor. It actually went all wrong because the actual subcontractor unfortunately got sick, was diagnosed with cancer, and ultimately died all within a 30-day period. Tragic event. That tragic event taught us a lot. One, we had a fully funded loan to a commercial mason contractor building a parking garage on a large apartment complex that was part of a city project, good money on the job, with a great, reputable general contractor. But the problem is when stuff hits the fan and something goes wrong, regardless of whether it's tragic or not, money stops flowing off the project. And we quickly learned through that lesson that we needed to make sure that we create a loan program that wasn't only good for the commercial subcontractor or good to leverage the more senior credit general contractor or owner developer such that we could just provide money and then lean on them if they don't pay us. We needed to truly find a solution that would benefit the commercial subcontractor, the general contractor, and the owner developer. Basically, something that was going to help the project itself. Now, our client's going to be the subcontractor, and they're going to execute their work under the contract they've been given by the general contractor, and we can certainly help them execute that much better if we can help them have access to the information they need up front, which we told you guys that was one of the missing pieces, the cash they need in the right format to spend when they need it, i.e. the beginning of the job, and for the vendors, material, and other equipment, other project-related expenses as they incur them. In addition to that information and now the cash to do it, we also needed to create a repayment structure that didn't put further stress on the commercial subcontractor. The only way to do that was to align it to when they are paid on the project. That now helps the general contractor. The general contractor can now have a subcontractor execute the project in the most efficient manner, have the money they need to use when they need to use it. They don't have to pay sooner, and they don't have to force money out the door. They haven't been paid yet. And that now allows your subcontractor to pay their vendors, material suppliers, etc., with the loan dollars or the project, and then we can be repaid from that same and then we can be repaid by the same project proceeds when they're invoiced, and more importantly, when they're paid to the contractor. That was the origin of the program that we created, and those were the shifts that we made through the painful moments of a problem. And as we know, and we've talked about this, problems are going to occur on construction projects. There's ebbs and flows all the time. The schedule isn't always the way it started out to be. The contract work isn't always the way it started to be. The site is not always the way it's perfectly designed to be. All of those things are very normal, even though they are technically different than as planned. But one thing we can always control is the cash that we have available to us, when we spend it, and how we can execute that and react to it. And that is what we set out to make sure we could fix and provide the information that the commercial subcontractors need up front. And by doing that with a project cash flow tool, by giving them the information and knowledge, they could make great decisions proactively. They were then able to thrive inside their same exact environment of construction, which is very normal to be complicated, painful, have high risk, high stress. But it's a lot less stressful and a lot less risky when you have all the right information. And that's why we decided that we needed to have a loan program that fit the project, which includes our client, the commercial subcontractor, their customer, the GC, or owner and developer, or all three. So remember, in the beginning, I asked those questions. Do you ever feel like you're good enough? Do you ever feel like you've gotten to a certain point, maybe you've grown really fast and now you're just scared to death because that business you're in is vibrating at a different frequency? Have you ever had a bad project and tried to figure out, should I get back on this horse and do it again? Have you ever gotten close to the brink of maybe feeling like you were going to financially really hurt yourself, but you basically got out of it and now you're scared to start again? Or maybe you're at a point where you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out, when do I take the right leap onto that next project, that bigger project? Hopefully what I've explained to you guys so far has answered some of those questions for you. But let me tell you a couple success stories that, if they haven't, I can pivot to those right now and kind of give you some examples of where folks in the same exact scenarios with the same exact thoughts, if not one, more than one of those thoughts, all combined, have actually been able to utilize this information, whether they get it from us or they've gotten it from someone else, or we met them at some part of their journey, that I can explain to you how they've grown, what they've done, and how that's worked out for them. Well, first and foremost, in the early years, we talked about a lot of folks. We met a lot of folks. But I don't have a lot of those success stories from the early years because we didn't do all the things we do today. So what I'm going to focus on are the last 5 or 6 years, where I've seen folks we met in those first 5 or 6 years, some still with us today, 7, 8, 9 years in. Some we've met 4 or 5 years ago, and we've watched them double, triple, or quadruple their businesses or more. I'm going to start with a client we met in the early years. I'm going back maybe 9 years now. He had just come out of bankruptcy. He had a steel business that they did fabrication, but also installation. They had gotten a few really bad merchant cash advance loans that had pushed them into a bad spot. And they were digging through it and they were making it work. However, they had brought in some folks and they were reinvigorated and they had lots of opportunity, but they weren't able to dig themselves out of that hole because it was just too difficult to get the work done, to keep the material supplier and vendors happy. And we were introduced to them at that moment in time. We were able to help them quickly finish some of the projects they had on hand and then give them the comfort and peace as they started the new projects to be able to have the working capital they needed to be able to execute those jobs. Over the next 3 or 4 years, they were able to accomplish a dozen or more projects. And each one they consistently were able to do, finish it on time, bill it, and get paid. Now, for them, one of the biggest cycles that they had was it took 70 or 80 days sometimes for them to be paid. It was just part of the way that it worked in their geographical market. The other issues were they were digging out of some holes where they got behind on their accounts payable. They had covered those gaps with some different loans that they were able to get from their bank, but also merchant cash advance loans. As those merchant cash advance loans fell off and we stepped in at that point, we were actually really able to help them those last 3 or 4 years kind of grow out of that. That company ended up going from $4 or $5 million a year to $12 to $15 million a year. They ultimately did not need us any longer when they got a combination of an SBA loan from their bank, as well as a new line of credit that they could use for working capital. And today, they're still using those exact systems they put in place with the financial discipline they learned through the process, with the working capital solutions they now have from their traditional bank. But it was those 4 or 5 years that we were with them and we were together and we financed a dozen or more projects together that we were really able to see and learn a lot of the things I'm talking to you guys about today. The next customer I want to talk to you guys about was a client that came to us about 7 years ago. They're in directional drilling. They were a $3 or $4 million business. They had all kinds of excitement. They had lots of opportunity, and they had a lot of ambition to grow and grow fast. They also had a lot of work in front of them, a lot of opportunity for work in front of them. They were very fortunate to have found great accountants that they worked with, ones that were showing them how to put the right infrastructure together. They were able to put the right overhead, but the right office and administrative setup that allowed them to have a good, solid foundation to grow from. And they were looking for a loan program. They were looking for access to capital. They did not grow until they could find something, someone, or us, in this case, Mobilization Funding, that they could use cash from. They were exploring different equity options, partners, bank lines of credit that they weren't able to get at the time. And if you're in construction, you guys understand, you're not able to get bank industry financing or traditional source of financing when you're trying to grow really fast in a milestone, progress-based billing, or an industry like construction. And so we were met at that point. They were a $3 or $4 million business, and over the next 7 years, today they're still a customer, and they are now going to do over $40 million a year. They're able to access all different types of geographical locations they were not able to do before. They even had some issues and problems with projects that were, sometimes 7-figure issues. But because of the systems and the programs they had in place and the people and the infrastructure and the professional services they surrounded themselves, whether it was their accountants, their lawyers, or even us in their loan program, they were able to weather those storms. So it's not a perfect hurdle. Everybody has those problems. But it's when you have the right team around you with the right access to information that you can actually endure just about any storm. And you will, because anybody that tells you they've grown a business, started a business, and they've been around for 10 years or more, and they've grown at all, if they tell you they haven't had problems or issues, they're either lying or they're the luckiest people on the planet. And we're no different here at Mobilization Funding. I'm certainly no different in my journey here at Mobilization Funding. And you know what? It's been very rewarding to work with customers because I also know that all these businesses we worked with, I'm not alone. It's been good to see for me that when I start to think there's problems or issues that we have, our customers have the same ones, but they can get through it. And it's been incredibly rewarding. The last customer I want to share with you decided to move from the Northeast down to Florida. They were a painting contractor doing big work. Think condo projects, large scale buildings. They had a lot of issues. Partners that they wanted to buy out. They had land. They had long delays on certain projects. We met them at that point where they were already a very sizable business. They also had bank lines of credit. They were a little bit more mature, but they were digging their way out of some problems. They had great opportunity and they do amazing work, and they always focused on performance. We were able to meet them at that spot and help them be able to feel comfortable taking on those third and fourth project that they might not have otherwise been able to do because of cash flow issues. By taking on our loan program, putting those extra projects outside of their normal operating budget and utilizing our loan program and the project proceeds, they were able to actually execute that work, keep their subcontractors happy, keep up with their accounts payable, and let that next 2 years worth of work that they did cycle through their normal business to the point where they got back on their footing, they were even more profitable, and they also had grown by about 25 or 30%. At that point, they went right back to their traditional lines of credit, which they never left anyway, but they became enough and they didn't need us anymore. And so there's 3 great examples, hopefully, that you can see yourself in or visualize your way around. And just remember, access to information is the problem that occurs. That's what causes all the stress. Yes, retainage is part of that. Long payment cycles is part of that information. If you could fix those things, it would definitely make it easier. But I can tell you, even if you had less retainage and shorter payment cycles, but you still didn't have the information, you still didn't know what your cash flow cycle was, you still didn't know how much money you had to invest, you still didn't know if you were going to be profitable, to what extent you were profitable, and if you actually met those profit goals, you're still going to run into those problems at some point, and it's going to keep you from thriving inside the industry. Our vision for mobilization funding, my vision for mobilization funding, is to create the awareness that we even exist. We have been told countless times that if I just wish I knew you guys sooner. I wish I knew you 4 years ago. I had a very successful business, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars, been in business for 40 years, said to me this week in an email, Scott, I wish I knew you when I was starting out 20 years ago. I would have got to a lot bigger. I would have saved myself a lot of stress, and we just didn't have access to that working capital. So my goals for mobilization funding is to create more awareness, create more solutions, let more people know that we're out there and exist. We can't help everybody with our loan program, but we can help everybody with access to information. Our cash flow tool that I discussed is free for anyone on our website. You just need your bid sheet and your own brain. Log into mobilizationfunding.com. You can access that tool, and this exact information about your project that you need upfront that I just discussed is given to you for complete free. You can use that to make all the right decisions, and certainly we'll be more than happy to walk through that project with you and let you know what our thoughts are too. That's our goal and vision of mobilization funding, our loan program, and how we want to engage with this community. If you could please share the project cash flow tool, this video, if you found it helpful, with anyone out in your network, I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, I hope you guys have a great week, and God bless you.